Gene. How's it going today?
I'm doing well in the beautiful French Quarter of New Orleans.
Oh, okay. Well, cool. Well, I'm a little under the weather today, but it's okay. It's a beautiful day. The sun is shining. Also, spring is right around the corner, so I'm happy
It is
about that.
indeed.
And I'm also happy that you took the time to talk to me about your work through Expanding Our Roots. You know, it's just a series that will give you an opportunity to tell your story, to share the work that you're doing in the community, and also to talk about how Louisiana is a place of culture and consciousness. You know, there are a lot of narratives that are pervasive in the media and in our own community about the community that aren't always positive. So this is just an opportunity to show that people are doing the work here.
Absolutely. We're thrilled to be joining you. We're looking forward to the conversation.
The first thing I wanted to ask you is a pretty standard question, not really controversial or anything or a gotcha question, but it's a good way to start. Where are you from?
I'm from here in New Orleans. I grew up right around Tulane University. My father was a professor there. And I actually ended up going to Tulane as well, which actually really, I think, provided a great opportunity to enter the work that we're doing. And the basic fact of it is that I was privileged in that situation because as my father was a professor there, they had tuition waivers for faculty kids, and I was a faculty kid. So I was able to come out of school without these student loans. And that allowed me to enter into nonprofit work very quickly and easily without thinking that, oh my God, I need to chase the biggest dollar. And it is a privilege, and it's a privilege that I totally understand. But in this case, I think that it certainly worked out well for me, allowed me to pursue fulfilling work, and hopefully has worked out well for the community as well.
Well, I'm from Baton Rouge, so my exposure to New Orleans is very much based on visiting. It's only an hour away from me, and also going to UNO. But you're from New Orleans, and you also went to a school in New Orleans. So tell me what your upbringing was like being in New Orleans.
Well, I think just being surrounded by the culture was really quite lovely and quite a privilege. I grew up going to the famous nightclub Tipitina's. At the time, I'll date myself as far as age is concerned. At the time, it was 18 and over, and that 18 and over was pretty lightly enforced. And so if you were 15 or so, getting in to see music at Tipitina's, which wasn't always the most popular musical form for, high school freshmen, to see the Neville Brothers, to see the Radiators, to see Dr. John, but it was the stuff that I really liked. And I always say I spent as much time at Tipitina's in school as I did in actual classrooms, and my GPA probably reflected that. So, in a lot of ways, the culture is all around you. But then as you get older, you realize even still how much stuff is still out there. The culture is so deep, and it really is like an onion where you keep peeling different layers. Right now, our offices are in the French Quarter. My kid's school is in the French Quarter. I've lived there previously. I don't live there right now. I'm very familiar with the French Quarter. And yet, there's still items when I'm walking down the street where I notice a certain doorway or I notice a certain way the shutters have been around that I haven't seen before. And I think that architecture and the culture is the same way. We're very well versed in local culture, and we think we know what we're talking about, but by all means, there's still stuff that pops up all the time that we're not even familiar with, and we're immersed in it. And so it gives you a sign that it's just, there's so many things going on, and there's so many different little pockets of deep rooted, but not always incredibly well exposed culture that people are always welcome to come in and join, but it's not necessarily being done for the sake of that. The culture in New Orleans is so much for the practitioners. It's for us. And I think that's one thing that people miss when they come into town. What they may see in the hired second line band, it's fine, but it's not the real thing. And the real thing, everyone would love to have you there, but if you don't come, they're okay with that too. And I think that's one of the things that separates it from other communities.
Well, speaking of tourists, one of the big reasons why a lot of people come to New Orleans, especially during the springtime, is for Jazz Fest, and also into Lafayette for Festival International. And you served as a juror in both of those festivals. Tell me about what that involved and what that experience was like for you, especially being from New Orleans and participating in this big cultural celebration?
Obviously, both Festival International and the Jazz and Heritage Festival, they're known as music festivals, and they get acts from all over the world that are fantastic. But that's not all that they have to offer either, right? There's a strong visual arts component to both of those, and that's where my role has really come into play. I serve on the board of the Louisiana Crafts Guild, a statewide organization for visual artists, especially those working in 3D elements within the realm of Louisiana, both traditional and contemporary craft. And both of those festivals really like to have that work featured as well, where they're going to have artist booths, that's going to have jewelry, that's going to have woodworking, that's going to have paintings, could have Mardi Gras Indian work at the Jazz and Heritage Festival. And it's really important to show the fine arts and fine crafts of this state. Now, as you can imagine, both of those festivals are very well attended, so it can be a very lucrative opportunity for artists to participate. And so you have many more people that want to show than you have booth spaces available. With the Jazz Fest, you're talking probably an 8-to-1 ratio of applicants to people that the festival can admit just because of space considerations. So the way that you solve that is that you bring in outside volunteer jurors who can be impartial, who can look over everyone's applications, and you score them. It really is just like a jury process, and it's incredibly quick. And one of the things that I always want visual artists to know is just how quick it is and how little time you have to make a first impression. You're probably talking about 3 to 4 seconds per application that you're actually giving it a very strong look. Now, you can always go back if you need to, but for the most part, you're moving through these things incredibly quickly, and grabbing people's attention out of the box is really key to being able to get a good score. It's something that I've enjoyed doing. It's also a great opportunity to see the work, and we do it on computers, see the work on computer screen. And then when you get out to the festival itself, you see the real work, and you get to talk to the real artists and really find out their stories, because they're usually really interesting folks, right? And it's usually really good conversations that you can have, because it's not a career that people come to without really being dedicated to it. You know, there are easier ways to make money, and so it means that these are people that really have something that they want to express and they want to share with the world. And I enjoy talking to them, and I enjoy interacting with them, and being a juror for these types of events is a great opening to then hopefully have further conversations and relationships down the road.
So let me clarify. Basically, if you go to Jazz Fest, the people that you see as vendors at Jazz Fest and Festival International are the people that are there because they had to go through an application process, and they made the cut.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So yeah, it's not just anyone can sign up. They put together an application packet, images of their work, an artist statement, biographies, and we review each and every one. And as I said, in Jazz Fest, you're talking, 800,000-900,000 applications perhaps. So as a juror, it's a commitment, but it's a commitment that's a lot of fun too.
I can imagine that being very fun, because even if you don't get to choose every single vendor, you get to see just how diverse artistic expression is in the community. Because if someone finds Jazz Fest to be a lucrative opportunity to promote their work, you're probably going to see a range of people from very small to very big and in between.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And, really, even though there's a strong focus on Louisiana, it's work from all over the country too. So you can really expand your horizons. And as you said, get to see all sorts of great stuff. And that's the thing, when most people are applying for a show like that, there's very little that's bad, right? And so the hard part when making these distinctions is between the good and the very good. And it can be tricky, but there's great stuff out there, no question about it.
Yeah, I can imagine so. And I mean, it's an exciting opportunity just to serve as a juror for anything, and just to be a part of that whole process.
Definitely.
I read your bio, and it's very interesting. I do want to talk about your work that you currently are doing, but I feel like your bio is so interesting that I don't want to overlook it either. I mean, you, on top of being a juror for these big festivals that are unfortunately unable to happen because of the pandemic, but are still very, very integral to the culture of this state. You also have done a lot of international things as well. And I'm not sure if they're large scale or small scale or whatever the case might be, but I still think they're cool. I read that you were a moderator or a panelist for like the World Cultural Economic Forum, the American Bar Association Conference, Music City Summit, and the Sociable City Summit. That's a lot of different diverse events and conferences and gatherings to be a part of. And I don't want to make you choose all the ones that you've listed on your bio, but of the 4 that I mentioned, what would you say was the most memorable and impactful for you?
I think the most interesting thing that we did was, and I'm not sure it's one of the 4, but I'm going to go off the script a little bit.
Go ahead.
Was when we went up to Canadian Music Week a couple of years ago, because what we were able to do there is we were actually able to program almost a full day of New Orleans content as part of their Music City Summit. And that was not just me personally, but because we could bring up 6 or 7 other artists, musicians, nonprofit administrators, people from WWOZ, people from A Closer Walk with Thee, Big Chief Howard Miller with the Creole Wild West. I'm sure they're names that I'm forgetting as well, but really be able to showcase all of New Orleans to an audience that really, you know, we're in another country. And that was really a lot of fun. We were kind of the belle at the ball that year, where we were sort of the featured entertainment, and the fact that we could put that all together, get everybody up through there, get people through customs, and have a really responsive audience. And of course, we're in Toronto, but there's still the French Canadian aspect of it as well. And so there are people from Quebec and people from Montreal who were very knowledgeable of the French culture, very knowledgeable of New Orleans, and being able to interact with them and show that, you know, what we did was perhaps different than what they expected, but in some ways there was commonality there as well. I thought was really interesting and really entertaining. And it was just a lot of fun. You know, it was May in Toronto, and it was already hot in New Orleans, and it was basically the equivalent of an early March day in Louisiana. It was 70 degrees and beautiful. So we had a good time in the city, and we promoted our culture really effectively, and it was good.
Yeah, that does sound really awesome. And it makes me have this instant wanderlust just thinking about being in Toronto. And I've actually had a chance to go to Toronto, but only for like a day. So like probably like a little less than 24 hours.
Yeah, it's neat. You know, there's pretty much everything going on. I think it's one of the most diverse cities in the Western Hemisphere, as far as different cultures and languages that are spoken up there. And there's definitely something for everybody. We've been there 3 years. Unfortunately, obviously couldn't make it in 2020 and won't be doing it in 2021. But it's been a really great opportunity for us to get up there and talk about what we're doing, get ideas from them as well, and just have a good time and learn a few things at the same time.
Well, judging by just the way you talk about culture and the way that you talk about the different things you're involved in, I can imagine that culture, especially New Orleans culture, is something that you're very passionate about. And I also know that influenced the work that you do with the Ella Project. So let's get into this work. Let me ask you a question. Let me ask you some questions about the work that you do. For one, what is the Ella Project? What do you all do? And also, what does Ella stand for?
So Ella Project is a New Orleans-based nonprofit 501c3 organization. We have 3 main tenets of services. The thing that we're probably the most well known for, and is probably our strongest avenue, is we're a pro bono legal assistance provider for artists, musicians, and grassroots nonprofits. That means that if artists need help with contracts, if they need help with copyright, if they need help with trademark or patent, or just setting up a business or licensing their music for film and television potentially, or if someone is infringed on their copyright, we can provide them high quality legal services for no fee. We're the only arts-based pro bono legal services provider in Louisiana. And in fact, there's one of only 2 in this sort of immediate Gulf South region. There's one in Texas, there's one in Georgia, but there's nobody in Mississippi, there's nobody in Alabama, there's nobody in Arkansas. We are specialized at doing this. The way that this works is that I'm not an attorney. My partner, Ashley Keaton, runs our legal program. And we partner with Tulane Law School. Tulane provides us about 36 students a year who help us present weekly legal clinics where we work with what they consider real clients. Obviously, they're real clients, but in the university setting, it's always a thing. They're like, it's real clients. It's not just make-believe stuff that we do in class. And we deal with their issues, and what we like to say is from concept to completion. There's plenty of legal clinics out there that do great work where, you can go meet a lawyer in a library for 30 minutes and you can try and get something notarized or have a 30-minute consultation. But when the 30-minute ends, basically the door closes. That's not our model. We'll sometimes work on things for months. There's sometimes things that are done in 45 minutes, and there's sometimes things that take 6-9 months to take care of. And we're available to everybody throughout Louisiana. While we're New Orleans based, we have clients from all over the state. I think in the last report that we did in 2020, we had served 25 out of the 64 parishes. So this is something that we're really proud of, and I think is a strong program and a strong opportunity for New Orleans artists or Louisiana artists. As we said, we always look at it this way. With arts law, it's really easy not to deal with issues. I always look at it like going to the dentist. If you have dental insurance, you go every 6 months and you get everything taken care of. If you don't, you kind of wait until your teeth really hurt. And at that point, it's a problem. Our goal is to basically almost serve like that insurance. Take care of your stuff on the front end. I'm releasing a new album. All right, let's make sure all the copyrights are in order. I'm forming a band. Let's create a band agreement. I'm starting up a basic new record label and I need to have some artist contracts. All right, let's get them now. Because while a lot of arts businesses go along very happily, we know that stuff intervenes, just like in life, right? We're all friends until we're not friends. And that's where the law can be really beneficial. And for the most part, people in arts law who couldn't afford to have access to attorneys, and we're talking for a high quality entertainment attorney, $400 an hour. It's significant money, right? We're talking about it. Most of our clients are making $25,000, $30,000 a year. The chances of them having $400 an hour is not significant. And it's something that you can worry about down the line. Again, I look at it as, if you're accused of a crime you didn't commit, you're going to find money to get a criminal lawyer. If you need to get divorced, you're going to find money to get a divorce lawyer. If you need to get your copyrights registered, I'll wait until that can be done down the line. And what ends up happening sometimes is that down the line ends up being that, you signed your rights away because you weren't paying attention to it, and it ended up costing you a lot of money. So our goal is to prevent that. And we serve about 250 clients a year. That basically is our capacity. We could take on more, but we're really looking at us as a boutique service that is focused almost exclusively on arts and entertainment. We do business services as well. We do individual consultations for people starting up new businesses. We do a workshop series. We do a 7-week music business intensive series that takes people through all aspects of the music business from the perspective of an independent musician. Contracts, publicizing your releases, touring, working with performing rights organizations, royalty collecting, estate planning, those sorts of things. And then we do a lot of cultural advocacy work where what we're really trying to do, and it goes into some of the discussions we were talking about earlier, conversations that we may have had at Music Cities Canada or Sociable Cities, is bring best practices to Louisiana and show off the best practices that Louisiana has to other people as well. I think a lot of times we look at ourselves and think, we're really behind the times down here. And there is some truth to that, right? But then when you look at a lot of other aspects, public performances dealing with the way that, music can basically be played in most parts of the city. There are a lot of people that come down here and say, oh, you guys really haven't figured out. And we go, well, we haven't figured out, but it's not necessarily because of any grand overarching plan. It's just sort of the culture of New Orleans is so strong. And that's really what our advocacy work looks like. It's a lot of exchange of ideas and then trying to engage sympathetic politicians with an understanding that we can do better, but not just saying we need to do better, but presenting them hopefully with a roadmap forward. It's one thing to say you're doing a lousy job. It's another thing to say, we think you can do better, and here's the way that you can do better, and here's what somebody else is doing. And we don't see any reason why we can't do that. And I found that works a lot better than just yelling at people.
Well, I know pro bono means for free, basically doing work for free, and you all serve a community that has a need. But I'm just wondering, what are some issues that low and mid-income artists and culture workers have that maybe larger income or more established artists and culture workers don't in New Orleans? Like, what are some examples of those issues?
Yeah. I think a lot of the issues carry over regardless. I think it's more of a question of, can you afford to pay somebody to deal with it or not? Having money doesn't mean that you're not going to have your copyrights infringed upon. It means that if you have money and you have your copyrights infringed upon, you have an attorney who you probably have on retainer who's actually looking over these sorts of things and will take care of it for you. You know, there's a famous New Orleans artist, I'm not going to use the name, but that's exactly what happened. You know, his work was very popular, and he had someone on staff basically that would comb the internet and comb art markets and see where there was infringement and then contact that person. And they were actually pretty reasonable about it. They weren't necessarily looking to hammer anybody. They just wanted to protect their work. And so they would just say, hey, you know what? I saw you're using our work. We need you to stop. They wouldn't say, you know, we're going to go after you for $250,000 in statutory damages and attorney fees. They would say, I'm going to need you to stop. Now, if you're an individual artist and you write a corporation and you say, I'm using my work, sometimes the corporation, if it's by mistake, is going to go, okay, you know, sorry, we didn't mean to do that. And accidental infringement happens. And sometimes they're going to say, well, we'll wait till they get an attorney. And until then, we're just going to blow it up. So in this case, we are their attorney. And this means that we can come with the force of our organization and say, hey, we know that you're infringing on this work. You need to stop. And they take us more seriously, to be honest. That's something that's going to go across all sorts of lines. But then I think also when we talked about earlier, the idea of especially in the music business, we always look at, there's like 20 different forms of contracts that whoever is the person with the money, whether it be a label, whether it be a movie studio, et cetera, is offering out to the artists. And they are looking to maximize their revenue too. And they're going to offer different contractual terms to people depending on what they think that person has at their disposal. And over the years, there's been a lot of exploitation that has taken place. There still is exploitation that's taken place. It may not be like it was back in the 70s and 80s, but it still happens. It just happens in a little bit different way these days. These days, it's more of, we're offering you a really bad deal, as opposed to, you know, back in the early days, especially of rock and roll, it was, we're offering you almost no deal. Now, the exploitation still takes place. It just takes place more of a wink and a nudge, and less with an absolute, you know, chicanery. So the methods may have changed, but I think, you know, there's still plenty of people out there that are willing to act unscrupulous. And especially with younger clients, like, they're looking to get a deal and they're looking to get paid. And I get that. And, you know, we crush dreams sometimes, because there are people that come in and think that they've got a really great opportunity for their music career. And once we start going over the terms, they realize by the end of the conversation that they actually don't, that, you know, they're basically giving up their rights for almost nothing. But it's written in such a way that you wouldn't really notice it unless you were an expert in it. And Ashley, who runs the clinics, is, you know, she's a professor at Tulane University for intellectual property. She's been practicing this almost exclusively for 20 years. She served on the board of the Grammys. So she can bring a level of knowledge that is extremely high level. And that's important to us. You know, we want to make sure that we're not just providing legal services, but we're providing legal services that are at an expert level.
So what I'm hearing is that the issues aren't necessarily different. It's just the resources and capital and access to power that people have that differs. So it's like a well-established artist will have issues with copyright, just as a up-and-coming, like, smaller, lesser-known artist would. The difference is that one might be able to get a lawyer or have more power to say, hey, please stop using my work. And a smaller organization or smaller artist who may not have a large following may have to hustle a little harder and have more support behind them that they don't have in order to protect their intellectual property and protect their rights as well.
Yeah, that's 100% correct. I mean, the American legal system is set up on a fair plane if you can access the system. And accessing the system is where pro bono work, not just for us, but with all the other organizations in this state and in this country that do it, are key. Like, we level the playing field, and that provides access to justice. It's one thing to say the law says this, but if you can't get in the courtroom, it doesn't really matter what the law says. And that's why pro bono is so important.
Well, you did mention this idea of, exploitation and standing up for people who don't have as many resources. And I want to kind of intersect that thought with my next question, because based on what I read, the Ella Project was started in 2004. It's 2021. And a lot has happened in New Orleans in the last 17 years, from Katrina to the rebuilding, the disputed rebuilding of the city, I would add, and also this pandemic. What role or what impact have all of these events had on the type of work that you're able to provide to the people that you serve and get resources to?
I mean, right now, obviously, the pandemic is very troubling, especially for our clientele. When you look at both live music festivals, as we talked about earlier, we're going to be in the second spring of No Jazz and Heritage Festival. That's a major income producer for a lot of our clients. Then you add the thousands of club gigs that happen all the time. Live music and festivals were some of the first things to be shut down, and they're going to be the last things that come back. And I don't envy any industry right now. I get that, but the restaurant industry has been open. It may not have been open at a rate that they're happy with, but it has been open. Our music clubs have been shut completely, and we did finally get some federal government relief that was passed in the December 2020 CARES Act bill. The money still hasn't gotten to the providers yet. It's a complicated system. It will get there, and that will be extremely beneficial. But right now, this is, for our artists, it's been probably a harder economic situation purely from the professional aspect. I'm not talking about, I was in New Orleans in Katrina. I was in New Orleans till 36 hours after Katrina passed over, and then I got out of town. But I got back in October. So I've been through this situation, and I've been through both of them. From a pure business aspect, this is a harder situation because there's nowhere to go. When Katrina happened, our houses were destroyed. But if we needed to go on the road for 6 months and make money, we could. This is not the same situation. Now, fortunately, technology has changed since 2005 too, right? There have been some other avenues to try and use streaming, to use virtual, to try and bring in revenue. And there've been some successes there. I think it's hit and miss, but I know that there are people, I have clients that have done okay with that. It hasn't been the same, but it hasn't been terrible. And we have gotten, because it is an international pandemic, I think we've gotten a lot more interest from Congress to get relief into people's hands, which, as we know, for those of us who were in 2005, was a very long process. It did take place, but God, it took a long time. Both of those were challenging. This, from a business perspective, I think is more challenging, in all honesty. Society-wise, social-wise, it's not. The wreckage that happened in 2005, I think it still haunts us all, and it'll be something that we never really get over. That said, at that point and throughout the years after that, I think that everyone from the city really realized how important the culture of the city was. When you're faced with losing something, you really begin to crystallize on how much you care about it. And there's a lot of the stuff that I think all of us, including myself, took for granted. It was just everywhere. It was in the air. It was all around us. And I think that everyone who has gone through the 2020 pandemic now has a little bit of a taste for that, like all the stuff that we thought we could do with no problem when this does end. And I certainly think and hope that we're in the end game now. I think everyone is going to have such a desire for culture, such a desire for live events, such a desire for the human connectivity, that as much as we try and make it work with our computer screens and social media, there's no exact replacement for, being in a club with 100 people who are fans of the same exact artist, and you all know all the words, and you realize, that if art and culture can do anything, what it really can do is provide a common language in an alienated society amongst a disparate group of people, where all of a sudden we have something in common with someone that we might not have expected we do. But at that show, at that festival, at that art opening, we see that this is something that can bring us together, and not in a cliched way, but it really is something that we all share together. And I think especially with the culture of Louisiana, it really is a unique culture, and it really is something that roots people to a sense of place, that roots people to their own history. We talked about earlier, this is work that a lot of times is done not for the sake of financial gain. It is done because it's always been done, and it's what our culture does, whether that be a Fado Doe in Lafayette, whether that be Mardi Gras morning down in the 7th Ward. It's the stuff that our culture does, and we do it because we love it, and we do it because it makes us realize who we are and where we're from in a way that very few things can replace. And throughout both of those disasters, I think we saw how strong those things were, and how, despite all the external threats that are there, how they will not only endure, but they will prevail.
Yeah, ingenuity is key when you're navigating this pandemic, but virtual events aren't the same as people showing up, because New Orleans is a tourist city. A lot of people go down Frenchman Street or go in the Quarter, find a good band that they like to hear based on the music coming out of the club, and go and sit and watch it. And also, not everybody has access to the internet. A lot of people have flyers, posters that they post around town promoting their stuff. Without those flyers and posters, people don't know, unless they are, subscribed to social media, or they're on an email list or internet, they may not know the virtual stuff is happening. So, it's very different. And I actually had an interview with someone about a month ago who talked about how, even when the pandemic is over and the economies in places like LA and Chicago and these bigger cities open back up, it's going to take a while for New Orleans to get back on its feet, because tourism is like the heart of the economy in New Orleans. Whereas in other places, business is more so the core industry, or healthcare, and those industries diminish capacity, but it didn't completely, go downhill. So it may take a while, and a lot of support and a lot of work to kind of get New Orleans back on track after this pandemic.
It absolutely is. I think that's spot on. And that said, I think that there's also fans, especially in the culture side of things, from all over the world, who are going to want to be here. I think where you're going to see a hit is, the larger conventions, the people that are coming here just for, the sort of Bourbon Street experience. That I think will probably be, that'll be interesting. That's not really my scene, so I don't want to speak on it with an authoritative voice. But I do think, and we definitely saw this after Katrina in 2005, the people that love the culture here, the people that are always at Jazz Fest, the people that always come for Festival International, I think they're going to be on the first plane down here. And I certainly hope that I'm right about that. We'll see. This is purely a guess, but I think that there's a need for those fans of the really unique stuff that we do to reconnect to it. And I think it's probably stronger than ever right now. So that's my optimistic viewpoint. I think that nobody does this sort of work unless you've got an optimistic heart, right? Because if you're a pessimist, you would have packed it in years ago.
The flip side is that tourism is down everywhere, even in cities much bigger than New Orleans, because people aren't traveling, and the people that are traveling are finding that they can't do everything, that they can't go to certain museums, they can't go to certain restaurants, or in most places, their tourism was based on festivals. So with the festivals gone, there's really not much that you can do in a community without a festival. So it's like, but I do hope that this is like a dam that, and when we get to the other side of this pandemic, the waters that have been dammed will gush through because we've broken the dam by just vaccinating and just getting to the other side of this to where we can have life again.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And we're getting there. It's not going to be tomorrow, but we're getting there.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, I know that the pandemic is kind of rearranging our sense of time. It's like sometimes we don't know what day it is or what time of day it is because things are just flowing together, you know. But I would like to always encourage everyone I speak to be optimistic about just getting to the other side and just dreaming big and being, you know, optimistic, as you say. What are some things that you would like to do with the Ella Project? What are some things that you have not yet accomplished that you would love to accomplish?
Well, I do think that, you know, in the classic idea of when there's crisis, there's opportunity. There are, when we do look, especially at rebuilding our cultural scene, there are opportunities to do things better. You know, I mean, I think that while the system worked, there was a heck of a lot of inertia that went into, for instance, you know, how musicians were paid. I think the opportunity with bringing back of live performances, we have the chance to stop a lot of no cover shows, for instance. And sometimes no cover shows can be okay for artists, but a lot of times they're really not great deals. And the problem is it doesn't present a floor. You know, when you look at any sort of labor organizing, you need a floor, whether it be a minimum wage, whether it be someone has to have a union card, whatever. And there's so much talent in the city that clubs would always be like, well, if you're not going to pay for like 20% of drinks and tips, like I'll just get somebody else, because it wasn't that hard to get somebody else. But I think that we will have an opportunity to have a situation where we get back to ticketed events, because I think it's the only way that live music returns, where they can actually put a cap on it without just holding people at the door. And I think that strolling in and out of Frenchman Street and hearing something for 10 minutes is not going to be possible for a while. And I don't think people would be comfortable with it, even if it was. And so I do think that you're going to start to see more smaller events, ticketed performances. And I think that actually could end up helping. You know, you'll talk to old time musicians, and we've always told them for years, like, that's not coming back, but maybe it is in this time. They'll talk about, oh, you know, back in the 60s, you know, on Bourbon Street, everything was ticketed. It was like a dinner theater. Everyone was paying. The bands got paid better. And if you look at the numbers, they're right. Like, the bands did get paid better 50 years ago than they do now, which is, you know, eternally bad for all of us. Like, it shouldn't be that way, but it kind of is. And we said it wasn't coming back, but we never anticipated a global pandemic. So maybe that's the positive that comes out of it, is that what you end up having is an opportunity for more people to actually put their money into stuff that they really value, and not treat music as a given and not treat it as a luxury, but treat it for what we think it is, as a necessity. And then I think also there's an opportunity to continue to have government support for the arts. You know, we have actually, through this pandemic, gotten more funding that came into the arts endowment. We have had money that's gone directly to arts nonprofits to keep them in business. And I think most people have found that was a good idea. I think if you look at, you know, the current COVID bill that's going through Congress right now, it has popularity amongst the people, regardless of what the politicians believe. So I'm hoping that what has really been 40 years of being against government funding for the arts, that maybe that conversation is starting to change, and that maybe we're going to see the United States invest in its culture like Canada does, like Europe does, like South America does, which to be honest, we don't. So I'm hopeful as far as that's concerned. That's been a lot of our advocacy efforts at the state and federal level. And citywide, it's to try and realize exactly what we talked about, that we will reopen. It is an opportunity to change the way that things were done. It is an opportunity to get more money into the pockets of musicians, and also have a situation where there's not an antagonistic situation between residents and tourist businesses as well. Because in all honesty, especially in the last 5 or 6 years, there was so much tourist activity in New Orleans that residents who live in French Quarter, Faubourg-Maroney, Treme, they were experiencing a decline in quality of life because there was just a nonstop party out their door. And while, a few people moved to downtown New Orleans expecting it to be 100% peace and quiet, like nobody loves being woken up at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday, right? Like, there's very few people that are like, oh, that's exciting. I'm so glad I'm up because there's, 20 people walking down the street whooping it up right now. And I think that there's an opportunity to look at how that works as well, to really look at managing the nighttime economy that we have that is strong, that does provide a lot of jobs to everybody, but managing it in a way that makes everybody happy and ends up in a situation where it doesn't become an antagonistic situation where, law enforcement is involved, because that never ends well for anybody.
And I think that people oftentimes see New Orleans as like the Las Vegas of the South, and it's not. It's a city that has a rich history, and it's a city that has a very strong tourist backbone in its economy, but at the same time, there's education, there's healthcare, there's business, there's so many other industries, and New Orleans is a very complex and multi-layered place. And I'm hoping that with that in mind, people will begin to see just how interconnected all these industries are. Tourists come because they love the history of New Orleans and the culture and the food. So we also have to make sure that we are taking care of the people who may cook the meals, who clean the hotel rooms, who play the trumpets in their bands and play the drums, who are street performers, people that make this culture, and also make sure that people see New Orleans beyond this like Disneyland version of New Orleans, which is basically like, Mardi Gras every day, second lines every Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. I mean, I'm not from New Orleans, I'm from Baton Rouge, but having lived in New Orleans, I do consider it a second home, and I want just as much prosperity from my first home of Baton Rouge as I do for my second home, no less or no more, equally. Just everybody's eating good, as I would say.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think that you hit on a really important point. And this is sometimes where we end up in dispute with some of the, really establishment tourism leaders of the town. Our view is that Mardi Gras would happen regardless if there's a single tourist in town or not. We're throwing the party for New Orleans. And if people want to come, that's great. And we encourage them to come, and we want to share what we have. But if they didn't come, we'd still be having it. And I think that's the key distinction that sometimes gets lost in the idea of New Orleans as a Las Vegas of the South or Disneyland, is that, we're doing this stuff, again, for us. And it's a deeply rooted thing. It's not a toy. It's not a plaything. And you'll see people go into neighborhoods that have hundreds of years of history, and they don't respect that. And I think that that's unfortunate, because they need to understand where this culture is coming from. And again, that it's not designed purely to sell drinks. If drinks get sold while the culture is being practiced, good for everybody. But ultimately, that's not the main goal, or at least it shouldn't be. And it's a consistent struggle. And it's a struggle that goes back generations. And it's probably not a struggle we're going to solve, but I think we can try and be on the side that we believe is the right side as much as possible, and try and influence the conversation as much as possible.
And that whole point you made earlier was very obvious by just last month. And I know I'm probably dating this interview, but just last month, even in the midst of a Arctic blast that we had in Louisiana, and with tourism at an all-time low. I mean, this was the first Mardi Gras that wasn't hosted in a traditional form since 1979, when there was a police union strike. And the fact that even after Katrina, there was Mardi Gras that was still happening, and then the pandemic kind of shut things down. Mardi Gras was still happening. People had the house floats. People had the parade, the reverse parades, or people where they were like the floats, and people could drive around and see the floats. And I'm sure that if Orleans Parish is shut down, you can always go to Meneray or Slidell or somewhere across the lake and go participate in Mardi Gras over there. And Mardi Gras was still happening even when the number of people in the city that would overflow the city weren't there. And the culture will always be here even before the tourists, because the tourists didn't create the culture, the people did.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. And I think that it's always key to understand that. And this year's Mardi Gras is a great example. I mean, we did a house float. It was a lot of fun, for one. It was a decent amount of work, but it was a lot of fun. And it provided a little bit of a sense of normalcy. And we certainly didn't do it expecting any tourists to find it. And I'm not sure if any tourists did find it. We did it for us. We did it for our own community. And we had a ball. A little bit chilly, but we had a ball.
It was very chilly. I used to live in New England. I used to live in New England for graduate school, and I did not like the winter at all. I think that my deep dislike of winter comes from living in a state where basically it's cold and everything's dead, but it's not, we don't get snow. So it's just cold and miserable. And when on the once a month occasion that it is cold in the winter. And then in New England, it was just cold and it snowed and we had ice and stuff, but it was just so foreign to me that I just couldn't get with it. Like I was very much a fan of the spring and the fall because those are seasons that are consistent. The weather is pretty much the same no matter where you go. And when you're in the spring and in the fall, and in the summer and winter, it's just Mother Nature just says, I'm tired of making sense.
Right.
Yeah. There are a couple of questions I wanted to ask you that I didn't get a chance to ask you, specifically about your educational background, because you mentioned in passing that you were at Tulane, and your bio also says that you went to UNO, and I went to UNO. Now, granted, I went to UNO as a undergraduate student. So and being a grad student is very different from being an undergrad, but you're still UNO, you're still a privateer. So tell me what your experience was like going to two schools in New Orleans, one Tulane, which is a top 50 school, and one UNO being like one of the most underrated schools in America, in my opinion.
Well, I love UNO. I wasn't a student there though. I was an adjunct professor there, so I taught there for. No, it's okay. But my wife is a UNO graduate though, so we love the school, and I had a great time teaching there. I taught in the master's program for arts administration, which was a lot of fun, and really is a great program for UNO too. They recruit nationwide for that program. It's the only arts administration program in the state, and really helps provide the people that are going to lead the nonprofits really of today. I'd say tomorrow, except that the graduates from that program are all over the place. And I'd love to see UNO get a lot more support. I'd love to find, when you see, and it's easy for me to say, it's not my money, but when you see people donating very large sums of money to Stanford, Ivy League schools, or even schools like Tulane, you're like, you know what, like if you really want to make a difference, the work that UNO is doing and, educating students, but also really creating a middle class of Louisiana. Without schools like that, there's not going to be a middle class in Louisiana. I think the mission is really important. I got I think a very solid liberal arts education at Tulane. It's a place that I enjoyed. It's a place where I made a lot of good friends. And it's a place where on my own, first time I'm living not in my parents' house, I really got to spend a lot of time learning more about the city, getting out of the university neighborhood I grew up in and coming downtown and going to clubs in the Bywater and finding little back of the hall establishments. And as you can see, like my college experience was much more outside of the classroom and getting to really explore the city, and then doing, enough to get a solid 3.0, but not a 4.0 GPA so that I could continue to do that. And I think that everyone who comes to, one of the reasons that we're really proud of the program with Ella Project and the work that we do with Tulane law students is that we expose them to this culture by force. And a lot of times in law school, you're very much like you're on campus or the library the whole time. And you may come to a great city like New Orleans or a great city like Chicago, but you don't really experience it. Well, one of the important things for us is, it's great to have the student help, but in a lot of ways it increases the workload that we have to have. Sometimes it'd be easier if we didn't have it. No offense to them. It's just that we've been doing this for a long time and they haven't. But it's important to us to showcase all the culture of New Orleans to them, and we kind of force it to them, because if they don't do their community service with it, they don't graduate. So they're going to meet brass band musicians, they're going to meet bounce artists, they're going to meet photographers who've been doing this sort of work for 35 years. They're going to meet, guys from Chalmette who would never probably cross their path if they were just hanging out uptown the entire time. So I think that's important. And I think also just Tulane University has done a lot more of that than when I was a student there. They've done more work to try and integrate themselves within the city and within the culture than they did 25 years ago. But 25 years ago, it's a long time. I'm old. What can we say?
25 years ago. Yeah, let's just say that I was an infant 25 years ago. So
yeah, I was a freshman in college. So.
Oh, wow.
Yep.
Wow. Yeah. Look at us telling our ages.
Exactly.
Yeah, I always joke, because as a Louisianian, I always feel like, and this might be completely wrong because you went to Tulane, I didn't, but I always feel like Tulane was like the Harvard of the South, because half the people I meet that go to Tulane are all from the Northeast or like from the West Coast. And because like everybody's like, Tulane and Loyola are next door to each other. Everybody in the South and in Louisiana goes to Loyola. Everybody up north goes to Tulane. And when I was in Maryland, someone said that because there's a lot of Jewish students that go to Tulane, it's nicknamed among the Jewish community in Maryland as Jewlane, which I don't know is a pretty appropriate thing to call Tulane. Although granted, this was a term that a Jewish person gave to Tulane, but the whole idea of Tulane is that it's like a school for wealthy, upper middle class, Northeastern New Englanders that wanted to come down south. And I don't know if that's true. Is that true? Is it not?
It's not wrong. It's definitely not wrong. I mean, obviously there's people from all over who end up in the university, but yeah, there's a strong contingent there. There's no question about that. And that's why I think that what they've done lately has been more important, because I think when I was a student there in the 1990s, they just kind of rolled with that. And now the idea is, all right, how can we make ourselves more relevant to the city that we're living in? And I think the school has done good work to make that happen.
Yeah, I've seen that Tulane has done a lot of community-based things in there. And I think that's great, because I think the negative perception of a school like Tulane as an outsider would be that it's basically it's not an Ivy League school, but it's a very pretentious, haughty, high dollar school. And the people that go there are very disconnected. But you're from New Orleans, you went there, and we see that Tulane has evolved, and perception is everything. Sometimes it's not always true, though.
Exactly.
But UNO, on the other hand, is a very working class school and also very diverse. The underrated thing is that it's very diverse. I mean, most of the time, that diversity is marketed, but it's an organic diversity. It's not like, oh, hey, we have a black student, here we have an Asian student, here they are. It's very much like you literally can just go to a classroom, take a picture, and bam, black, white, Latino, Asian, Arab, all in one place, just organically there. And that's what I loved about UNO, being able to meet so many people from all over the world and feel as though it was organic and not forced.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right, because it is organic, and because it's people that are seeking an education, and they're not seeking necessarily, as you said, some sort of pretension that comes out of it. And I have plenty of friends who started at Tulane and ended up at UNO, and they all say that the work was harder at UNO. Like, it may have been harder to get into Tulane, but the actual classwork was harder at UNO. So
yeah, my grandmother would say that UNO was a school with an Ivy League education and a Bush League budget.
Yeah, and you have to do anything to make that Bush League budget a little bit better.
Yeah, and if I didn't go to if I wasn't in the gifted program at my high school in Baton Rouge, I probably would not have been as prepared, because some of the courses that I took my freshman year at UNO reminded me of some of my high school courses because I wasn't gifted. But if I wasn't gifted, I wouldn't have been prepared, because man, like UNO, I mean, beautiful school, loved it. They don't owe me anything, but there were some days, I had my days where I was like, I'm not going to fail this class, but I don't know if I'm going to make an A.
Right. I hear you.
Yeah. New Orleans has gone through a lot. New Orleans is going through a lot. What is your vision for New Orleans? What is the vision that you want to see for the city that you call home? Because, I asked a lot of people this question in the interviews, mostly asking them to reflect on the city or the state or the world. But I think it's appropriate for this purpose, to focus on the city that you deeply care about. And what is that vision that you want for your city based on the work that you do, what you see in the community, and your experiences having seen New Orleans go through the things that it's gone through in your lifetime.
My vision is that anyone who wants to be here can be here. And I think that that's something that we can't say right now. You know, we need opportunity for everyone who wants to live here to be able to make an honest living here, to not have to seek out other places just because there's no jobs here in their field. You know, they can say all the time, well, there's jobs here. Yeah, we don't need jobs. We need jobs in the fields that people want. And if people don't, not everyone's going to like it down here, and that's okay too. You know, there's plenty of people that the culture of the city, not necessarily talking about the art form, just the overall permutations of the culture, it is different. It is a little bit slower paced than you're going to find in northeastern cities. You know, things don't necessarily work here as far as infrastructure is concerned. That I don't expect to fix, but I do want there to be people where they go, you know what, like, that's okay. Like, I really like the style of life down here. I really like the ability to go out to eat in all these amazing restaurants. I really like being able to find all this great art in a festival every day. And I like not having to shovel snow. And I want to live in New Orleans, and I want to be able to have a job in New Orleans that allows me to live properly there. And I think that's what we still haven't been able to do. There's still too many people that I know, they're like, I love it here. Guess what? I got to go to Washington, D.C., or I got to go to Seattle, or I got to go to New York City. It's not that they want to, it's that they have to. And that's what we need to change. And if we can do that, we'll really get somewhere.
There are some things that people will forget if they have an opportunity. Everybody talks about how horrible Los Angeles traffic is, or the subway in New York City and how crazy it is, or how when government is in session in DC, then it's like the city is kind of like in perpetual gridlock because all the people in Congress are there, and anytime the president's doing something, the roads are shut down. And Atlanta, everybody talks about traffic, especially if you live in the suburbs. So infrastructural problems won't stop people from moving to a community. But there's a reason why people aren't moving to small towns, even if those small towns have good traffic and quiet spaces and low crime, because many people perceive small towns to not have opportunity. And in the case that we see in Louisiana is that everybody leaves their communities. Louisiana is not even in the top 10 in terms of more people leaving than coming. But at the same time, the perception of Louisiana is that it's not a place of opportunity, which is a shame because there's so much potential. It's not like we need to create some opportunity for Louisiana. We just need to embrace what we have and make it better. Whether it's in Baton Rouge, whether it's in New Orleans, Lafayette, Shreveport, we just need to figure out how can we show a little bit of love for the people that are here and the things that we have, and also show that everybody is connected. And you can't help one group of people without helping the other. We all have to kind of roll the P-roll together.
And I think, unfortunately, that's been a long history of the state of Louisiana, is, prioritizing helping one people and thinking that if you make equal opportunity, then basically you're giving something up. And it couldn't be farther from the truth. I mean, what you're doing is you're empowering everyone in your state to achieve their fullest potential. And we've looked at that wrong for hundreds of years. And in a lot of ways, we're still looking at it wrong today. That fight is not won by any stretch of the imagination. And it's still going to haunt us. And until we can finally kick that really outdated thinking to the curb, we're still going to struggle.
Last question. And you have done a lot of things in your life, which means you've also been interviewed a lot, whether it's for jobs, whether it's for newspapers. You've been interviewed. And there's always this feeling of not saying everything you want to say, or not feeling as though you've expressed everything that you want to express and get off your chest. So my last question is giving you an opportunity to share anything that you may not have had a chance to share, or elaborate on anything that you may have needed to clarify or elaborate on, or just to give some parting words before I close out this interview.
Yeah, I would just encourage everyone to to find some part of art that really resonates with you, and to think that, and not think that it's not for you. While there may be different styles of music you like and don't like, there may be different styles of painting that you'd like or don't like. And it doesn't always mean that you have to be a practitioner of it. But I think that also that's probably easier than people think it is too. That, you know, we don't always have to just watch people doing stuff. It's fine to just create our own stuff, not necessarily looking to make it a professional endeavor, but just to do it because making stuff is fun. But to find something, if you don't already have it, that you can enjoy the culture that we have here in the way that you see fit, because it's a great opportunity, and it's not something that people can say in other parts of the world and other parts of this country. You know, we really do have an embarrassment of riches as far as the culture is concerned. And for all of us who live here, find what you dig and take advantage of it. It doesn't mean that you have to like second lines. It doesn't mean that you have to like Cajun music. There's a lot of stuff here, and there's a little bit of thing for everybody. Find what you like and be a participant, especially as we're getting out of this pandemic. It's a great opportunity to really connect with your fellow citizens and hopefully have a really good time too. So I think we should all do that, and I think we all will as soon as we can get out of our houses.
Well, Gene, thank you so much for taking the time to, you know, share your experiences and to talk about the work that you're doing. And I'm hoping that maybe a year from now, you'll probably be booked and busy because there'll be more people touring, more people, you know, on the road, more people making music. And I also hope that you're also able to see New Orleans be the city that you know it to be as well.
I really appreciate it. I really appreciate all the work that you're doing for the culture and for Louisiana. And it's been my pleasure to spend this afternoon chatting.